What's up, YouTube? Eugene here. Hope you're all well. Today we're going to be looking at, from Frederic Malle, this is Iris Poudre, which is a massive floral fragrance. It's not such a massive iris perfume, but it's just a grand ball floral. Very classic, also very futuristic take on florals and iris. This was released in 2000, so 20 years ago when Frederic launched his brand. There were about 6 or 7 really amazing perfumes that came out alongside this one, including Musk Ravageur, Noir Peace, and Fleur de Cassis, Le Parfum de Trace, En Passant, all my favorites, all very big, bold creations. Really amazing that he was able to get these all off in the same year. Can't imagine that happening very often, but Iris Poudre was created by Pierre Bourdon, one of Frederic's favorite perfumers, who's also known for his work with Kouros and blockbuster Cool Water, also working on French Lover or Bois d'Arage, depending on where you're from. But Iris Poudre to me is not a prototypical or iris soliflor. It's not just iris. It's definitely an abstract iris lost amongst many other florals. It's just like a wave of florals that keep coming at you, and iris just kind of gets lost in there. So a prototypical iris would look something like possibly dry, soapy, fungal, mushroomy, earthy, green, rooty, powdery, clean, crisp. Iris has just so many facets to it. But the iris in here, to me, is found early on in the opening, and it is slightly green. It's dry and powdery. So when I hear the name Iris Poudre, I feel like, there is a good dose, a good concentration of iris in this perfume, but there's just so much more going on that the iris kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So there's iris in it, and the iris part is powdery. I don't find a whole lot of powder to the rest of this perfume. I also get a lot of aldehydes from here. That's, one of the first things I'm going to notice. And aldehydes, to me, right away make me think Chanel. I go straight to Chanel, and I think specifically number 5. This does have a lot in common with number 5. I almost think when they went to orchestrate this, they had grand perfumes in mind, or were influenced or inspired by classics from the past. But even though it reminds me of number 5 and the characteristics, it smells nothing like number 5. Or does it remind me of any other perfume that I've smelled? Although it does have, that classic characteristic. It's got that aldehydic explosion in the opening, which is it's sharp and possibly metallic. Even though this perfume is very well rounded and it's got warm edges to it, there are some kind of sharp aspects. I believe that's all coming from the aldehydes. So they're not soapy aldehydes like number 5, or number 5 is very fizzy and kind of like champagne like. I don't get that from this. To me, they're just more metallic and add colors and sharpness than what you'd get in number 5. But I also get a lot of florals in here, and they're mainly white and yellow florals. I think Frederic himself or his team of creators see more than I do. I don't see much green, but this is the Iris Poudre Synesthesia bottle, which they kind of coordinate colors with scent, and he's got a big blotch of green here and a blotch of yellow, And although I'd like to see more green in this perfume, or I would have liked to see more green, I don't. I can see little bits and pieces here, but I don't get green earth. I don't get stems or roots or any of that kind of stuff. Thinking now, there is a little bit of vetiver in here that gives that iris some dry, woody aspect. So maybe that's where this greenness is coming from. I'm not sure. And there's not a whole lot of information on these, except for explaining what they really are. But there's Iris Poudre Synesthesia bottle. I really like what they've done here, this whole idea of combining colors and scents, because when I wear perfume, my go-to is colors, shapes, textures. Those are pretty much the first three things I try to visualize, and then from there I'll paint a picture, or some other kind of abstractness will come to mind. But for the most part, I get white and yellow florals. I get golds. I get golden. They're not ambers, but I get golden florals. Maybe it's coming from the aldehydes as well, but I don't get any rose. Roses listed, lily of the valley. I get some sharp florals that the iris sits on top of, and I'm thinking I'm getting more of creaminess. So to me, it almost feels more like lilacs and orchids than it does your classical jasmines and roses. But there's definitely a ylang in here, which gives it a little bit of fruitiness. There's just, a very small hint of fruitiness, and the sweetness in here is it's at an absolute minimum. There's zero sweet, there's zero sugar, there's zero candy. The aldehydes are... So what I get from these aldehydes, the aldehydes are a huge player in this, and it's funny because the aldehydes combine with the musk, and I get some saltiness from it, and sweat. It reminds me of sweat, something sweaty. And I think this is very abstract. This is not something that you're going to find somebody wearing every day. I couldn't wear this every day. As much as I like it, I don't want to wear this every day. This is more conceptual. This is Frederic Malle building his dream car that's not meant to be driven on the road, more to be stored in a display case and say, haha, look what me and my perfumer have created, this dream car that's only for show. And that's just, to me, a sign of skill, of perfumers putting art together. But yeah, I can't help but get sweaty. It's not sweaty iris, it's like sweaty musk and saltiness. It's like salty florals, or they've used salt instead of spice, but I definitely get a lot of salt and I get a lot of sweat. So in the base I get, it's funny, unless I had read the notes, I see tonka, and I can see the tonka, but it's just used that I'm not a big fan of tonka. I find it's overused. It's easy to sell. It's very commercial note, but here it's used with a lot of respect and class and at the right dosages, just to give it a little bit of creaminess and very minimal sweetness and warmth in the base, along with vanilla and sandalwood. Sandalwood gives it a little bit more creaminess and warmth as well, but it's definitely not, tonka and vanilla would make for an oriental. This is definitely not an oriental. There's no golden ambers or hues to this. There's not much powder to consider this an oriental. I would call this definitely a woody floral musk. It's just florals on top of florals on top of florals. It's very well rounded though. You know, I see lots. It's created brilliantly. I get within the roundness, I get a lot of sharpness coming from the florals, and I get whites and yellows. This is a very bold, powerful statement maker, and as much as I do like it, this to me is a Saturday night out on the town in your best dress with your date in his best suit. And I remember it does remind me of something. I'm not going to give you some cheesy, you know, classic love movie, but this brings a lot of association back to me being a child. My parents were socialites, and they went out every Saturday practically. They had, you know, friends, and they were invited to parties and weddings, and they were always going out. And my mother would make sure we were well taken care of. She'd order us some food, and she would call every hour. But before they would leave, she was always like impeccably dressed in a dress, she had her purse and her high heels, and she always wore perfume. And this is the association I get. Just a very well-dressed person. My dad was always well-dressed too, in a suit and tie, shoes, but he never wore any fragrance. I think it bothered my mom, but he never really obliged. She bought him fragrance, he never wore it. He just didn't care for it. To him, you know, fragrance didn't mean much. It was more his idea of a good time was to go and drink with his buddies, and, you know, in the men's corner while the women were doing their things. He just didn't care for fragrance as much as my mom or I did. But it's definitely a going out grand ball perfume. It's funny, Dior has a perfume called Grand Ball based around jasmine, and that to me is just much more easier to wear and more casual. And this to me is the real Grand Ball. This is pure, like, unadulterated, classic, just very traditional aldehydic floral. It's funny, the aldehydes in here, as much as the florals remind me of traditional classic perfume, the aldehydes have something really futuristic to them. Like, I just think future. So you have this mix up of, you know, history and future, which will never be, you know, it'll never be now. What is now? What are we smelling? Things being released today is just trendy stuff. So this will always remain a classic, this style of a fragrance. But anyway, there's Iris Poudre. I love Iris Poudre, but I don't want to wear it every day. It does challenge me almost as much as Un Fleur de Cassis. Un Fleur de Cassis challenges me in a different way, but they're both quite challenging. This one not so much, but it's probably, and I don't think Frederic Malle perfumes are known for being challenging outside of the Desert Gems, but this and Un Fleur de Cassis are the two that challenge me the most in a good way. I do like them. I don't think most men would appreciate these because they do lean heavily on the feminine side. So I'd be careful if you're a man. You know, just because I like them doesn't mean everybody will. But anyway, there's my review of Iris Poudre. If you've tried it, I'd love to hear your comments. Leave a comment down below. I love reading your comments. Drop a big like if you haven't already. Be sure to subscribe. And I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.